Afghanistan and Pakistan once again found themselves on the brink of war. What started as border skirmishes escalated into deadly airstrikes, civilian casualties, and a collapsing ceasefire. Kabul accused Islamabad of violating Afghan sovereignty through repeated bombings, while Pakistan claimed it was targeting militant groups sheltering across the border. In mid-October, Pakistan launched a series of airstrikes inside Afghan territory, targeting alleged militant camps near the border. The strikes killed several civilians, including Afghan athletes returning from a cricket match. Within hours, Taliban forces retaliated with cross-border attacks on Pakistani military outposts. The violence quickly spread to key border crossings like Torkham and Chaman. Pakistan closed its gates, halting trade and isolating Afghanistan economically. For a landlocked nation already facing famine and unemployment, the closure was devastating. Qatar rushed to host peace talks in Doha, and a temporary ceasefire was announced. Yet clashes continued in the provinces of Paktika, Kandahar, and Khost. To understand why Afghanistan reacts so fiercely to Pakistan's actions, one must go back to 1893. That year, British colonial officials forced the Afghan ruler Abdur Rahman Khan to sign the Durand Agreement, drawing a line that divided Pashtun tribes between British India and Afghanistan. Afghanistan never fully accepted this line. When Pakistan inherited the border in 1947, Kabul refused to recognize it as an international boundary. In fact, Afghanistan was the only country in the world to vote against Pakistan's admission to the United Nations, precisely because of the Durand Line dispute. For over a century, Afghan leaders have viewed the border as an artificial divide imposed by colonial powers. The Taliban, though often described as a Pakistani creation, share this sentiment. Many of their top commanders come from the very Pashtun tribes split by the border, and they see themselves as protectors of a greater Pashtun homeland. Actually, Afghanistan adopts the Pashtunistan concept, which emerged in the mid-20th century, when Afghan nationalists began advocating for a single state encompassing all Pashtun territories, stretching from Afghanistan's east to Pakistan's Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and Balochistan provinces. In the 1950s and 60s, successive Afghan governments openly supported the movement. They issued Pashtunistan postage stamps, broadcast nationalist propaganda over Radio Kabul, and even provided training to Pashtun separatists from Pakistan. The issue became a rallying point for Afghan nationalism and a permanent irritant in Afghan-Pakistani relations. Pakistan, for its part, considered the movement an existential threat. Any redrawing of borders along ethnic lines could trigger a domino effect, encouraging Baloch or Sindhi separatism. Islamabad therefore treated the Pashtunistan idea as treasonous and worked tirelessly to suppress it. The Taliban initially avoided nationalist rhetoric, focusing instead on their Islamist identity. But the current generation of Taliban leaders have begun blending religious legitimacy with ethnic nationalism. In recent years, official Taliban statements have increasingly referred to the Durand Line as a temporary demarcation, and Taliban border guards have been ordered to remove Pakistani fences built along it. What this means is that Pashtunistan has quietly re-emerged as an ideological project, not necessarily as a map to redraw borders tomorrow, but as a vision that justifies Afghanistan's defiance of Pakistan today. There are several overlapping motives behind Afghanistan's aggressive posture. First is sovereignty. Pakistan's regular airstrikes inside Afghan territory humiliate the Taliban regime, which claims to have restored Afghanistan's full independence after 2 decades of foreign occupation. Every violation of Afghan airspace is seen as an insult to that hard-won sovereignty. Second is domestic legitimacy. The Taliban face internal divisions and growing dissent from local commanders. Many of these fighters are deeply anti-Pakistani and accuse Islamabad of manipulating Afghan politics for decades. By confronting Pakistan militarily, the leadership in Kabul unites its ranks under a common enemy and strengthens its nationalist credentials. Third is strategic deterrence. The Taliban cannot match Pakistan's military strength, but they can impose political costs. Cross-border raids and surprise attacks serve as deterrents, warning Islamabad that any future incursion will come at a price. The goal is not to occupy territory, but to shift the balance of fear. And fourth motivation is the Pashtun factor. Many Taliban fighters view themselves as defenders of the Pashtun people on both sides of the border. When Pakistani jets bomb Pashtun villages in eastern Afghanistan, it reinforces the perception that Islamabad is at war not just with militants, but with Pashtuns as a whole. That perception fuels the Taliban's moral justification for striking back. Pakistan holds enormous leverage over Afghanistan through its control of key trade routes. Every closure of the border suffocates Afghanistan's fragile economy, cutting off food, medicine, and fuel supplies. The Taliban understand this dynamic well, which is why they have turned to force to change it. By escalating militarily, Kabul hopes to compel Pakistan to reopen borders and negotiate on equal footing. The Taliban are betting that Pakistan's own domestic crisis make it unwilling to sustain a prolonged conflict. In that sense, Afghanistan's aggression is as much psychological as military. Yes, this confrontation has implications beyond the border. India quietly benefits from the tension as it forces Pakistan to divert attention and resources away from Kashmir. Iran, often at odds with Pakistan over sectarian issues, also welcomes anything that weakens Islamabad's influence. Meanwhile, China worries that ongoing instability threatens its Belt and Road investments, particularly the China-Pakistan economic corridor that runs close to conflict zones. In conventional military terms, Afghanistan can't invade Pakistan. Pakistan's army remains one of the most capable in the Muslim world, backed by air power, advanced weaponry, and nuclear capability. Afghanistan, though hardened by decades of war, lacks a modern military structure. But invasion doesn't necessarily mean tanks rolling into Islamabad. It can mean the projection of force, the crossing of borders to seize symbolic outposts, and the assertion of territorial claims through repeated small incursions. For the Taliban, such actions are not about conquest, they are about redrawing psychological borders. In that sense, every attack on a Pakistani checkpoint or every Taliban soldier raising a flag near the Durand line is part of a long-term strategy to remind Pakistan that Afghanistan never accepted the partition of the Pashtun lands. Afghanistan's military actions, though limited, carry a deeper message. The Taliban are trying to reclaim ownership of a nationalist agenda that predates them. By invoking the memory of Pashtunistan, they connect their modern struggle with Afghanistan's century-old resistance to colonial borders. In the eyes of many Afghans, this is not expansionism but reclamation, the restoration of a dignity they believe was stolen by foreign powers and perpetuated by Pakistan's dominance. Afghanistan's confrontation with Pakistan is about more than recent airstrikes or militant groups. It's a struggle for sovereignty, recognition, and identity, a clash between a state trying to escape its patron's shadow and a neighbor determined to maintain control. The talk of invasion is symbolic, but the motivations are real. The Taliban want to assert independence, defend their borders, and revive the spirit of Pashtun unity that has defined Afghan nationalism for generations. Whether this leads to another war or a new political settlement will depend on how far both sides are willing to go. But one thing is certain, the border between Afghanistan and Pakistan is not just a line on a map. It's a fault line between history and modern politics, between empire and resistance, and between two nations still fighting over who gets to define what it means to be Pashtun.